By the time that convoy of strangers figured out they were boxed in behind a welded steel gate, I was on my porch with a steaming mug, watching a hawk ride the wind over Pine Ridge Summit, and thinking, yeah, this was worth every dollar I slipped my buddy for that weld down the road. HOA President Margaret Hawthorne was beating the bars with a ski pole like she was ringing the Liberty Bell, and up the switchbacks I caught the glitter of red and blue. As the sheriff rolled in slow and steady, the whole mountain holding its breath like it knew the show was about to start. I'm David Brennan, 42 software engineer by week, mountain hermit by choice. My granddad built this cabin when planks were wider and men swore by handshakes, and when he passed, I promised I'd keep the place the way he loved it: neat, woodpile-tight fences, freezer full of venison. Neighbors kept at a kind distance and quiet lots of quiet, you know what I mean? The kind that lets your shoulders drop 2 inches the second you step out of the truck. Life was simple, predictable, peaceful. Right up until Margaret moved into the valley below with her clipboard and smile that looked painted on at a dealership. She wasn't shy about it either. That first month she floated up here like she owned the sky rights, admiring architecture, she said, lining pine cones on my steps for photos, staging my porch like a catalog. And when I caught her on camera and called it out, she laughed. Not embarrassed at all, just that syrupy, "Oh, you tone promised it wouldn't happen again." Then 2 weekends later, I find my fire pit, hot marshmallow goo, on my Adirondack chairs and footprints right through my living room where the quilts used to be. Community campfire. Experience. That's what she posted. 8 people on my property, like they'd booked a national park lodge. And if you think I didn't see red, you'd be wrong. I called the sheriff and Deputy Morrison good guy. Plain spoken says without no trespassing signs, it's tough to make charges stick. So I spent a whole Saturday marching my lines like a surveyor, hammered signs every 50 feet, trail cams tucked like owls in the trees. I wasn't playing for 3 weeks. The mountain went quiet again, and I started to think maybe the message got through. Then came that December run to Pine Ridge Village, just groceries and a coffee, and I come back to a driveway packed like a ski resort. Shuttle stop, strangers on my porch sipping cocoa from my grandma's china quilts draped over their shoulders like movie props. Margaret in the center giving a tour guide spiel about shared amenities. And it hit me cold. Like stepping in a creek in January, she turned my home into a product. I didn't yell, "Not yet." I told them this was private property, no rental, no authentic cabin package, and they had 5 minutes to leave. You could see them all looking at one another like, who do we believe, some guy in flannel or the woman with a clipboard? Then I mentioned the sheriff hit record on my phone, and suddenly folks moved like a flock murmuring apologies while side-eyeing Margaret. That's when she told me I owed her the money. $75 a head, said I'd humiliated her in front of potential members, and I swear I tasted copper from biting my tongue. "Set foot here again and you're getting arrested," I said. She smirked like I'd just told a knock-knock joke. "You wouldn't dare make a scene in a small community," she said, the kind of line that ages badly in a story like this. Let me back up a sec, because the next part only works if you understand I am not a hothead. I'm methodical, I think in systems. My old buddy Tommy Kowalski welds gates for the Forest Service. He's seen every trick: bolt cutters, hinge pins, chains through winch bumpers. So at 4 a.m., we're at the only access gate to my ridge stars bright enough to read by, and Tommy burns a neat, mean seam that turns a padlocked gate into a single piece of steel. No hinge to pop, no chain to cut, no miracle pry bar. That gate became a statement. By noon, right on Margaret Standard Time, a white SUV and 2 loaded minivans snake up the road, people in matching beanies, mittened hands pressed to the glass, like kids at an aquarium. She hops out first and does that confident walk. That's really a performance. Grabs the gate, tugs again. Then that smile cracks. The next 20 minutes are pure theater. Phone calls huddled. Whispers. A guy shakes the gate, like it owes him money. Nobody can turn around on a single-lane shelf road. Backing down would be like ice dancing in a school bus. Finally, she finds one of my cameras and yells at it like I'm a genie inside constitutional rights. HOA fines, lawsuits. Words thrown like handfuls of gravel that don't land anywhere. I took my time finished. My mug locked the cabin, then rolled down in my old truck with the heater squealing and the dash rattling like an honest instrument. I parked. Where the wind carried my voice, hit record again, explained to everyone. They were trespassing at the invitation of someone who had no authority here, that law enforcement was already briefed, and that their refunds were a matter for civil court. You'd be surprised how fast people reevaluate their allegiances. When the word sheriff enters, the chat phones came out, voices rose, and Margaret started spinning tales about having verbal permission from the previous owner. Which, and this is my favorite part, was my grandfather who'd been gone 3 years. Someone actually gasped, like we were in a soap opera. "You took my quilts," I said. And that detail, weirdly, you could see it land the handmade human part of the violation, not just the money. Here's the twist. I didn't see coming. One of the tourists, a quiet woman in a red scarf who'd kept to the back, asks me if the quilts were the faded blue ones with the tiny hand-stitched pine cones. I said yes, and she looks Margaret dead in the eye and says, "Those were in your listing photos." Then she shows me her phone, not just a post on an HOA page, but a full little storefront setup with dates, times, add-on cocoa packages, and buried in the fine print, an address that resolves to my parcel number. The woman tells me she works in the county treasurer's office off duty today, but she deals with business licensing all week. And yeah, she's about to make a call. So now it's not just my word and a handful of angry families. It's documentation, reaching into county systems, and Margaret's face goes the color of paper left in the sun. Right then, Sheriff Coleman crests the bend calm as a man who has seen this movie. Deputy Morrison steps out and can't quite keep the amusement off his face. They go about it by the book. IDs, statements, the whole thing. And it's almost funny how quickly people volunteer information when they realize the stage has rotated. Phone screenshots of payments, date-stamped posts promising wildlife backdrops and historic cabin access. One guy even brought a printed itinerary because his wife is that kind of organized, which, God bless organized people, because this pile of proof stacks up higher than my wood pile. Margaret tries to pivot into community building, good neighbor, misunderstanding, and it just clangs on the dirt. The sheriff reads the list dry and clean: criminal trespass fraud, operating an unlicensed tour, and then, because math is cruel, potential tax evasion. If those payments never met the light of day, she sputters about her husband being a lawyer, which would have had more bite if her husband wasn't an accountant at a box factory, small towns, man. You can't beat the Wikipedia of gossip, and while she's talking, I notice a young couple in the back, the woman pale and breathing shallow, and I realize the panic of being trapped on a shelf road is getting to her, so I pull one of my quilts from the truck and hand it over. She nods, breathes, and in that moment, the mountain feels like it belongs to actual people again, not to rules on a clipboard. We escort the families out in reverse, slow and careful. Tommy rolls up with a cutter to give us a temporary exit. The wind smells like snow, phones keep buzzing with refund demands, and we're leaving a review threats. And when the last minivan disappears, Tommy and I look at that gate, look at each other, and he seams it shut again. Not spite, just boundary. When the dust settles, Morrison tells me it wasn't just me. 3 other owners had complained about folks wandering onto their land with cocoa cups like they'd been promised a package tour. He did the math on the head count and time range and came up with a number north of 200 customers, around 15 grand, which, if you know thresholds, moves a case from annoying to felony country. And yeah, I slept like a rock that night. Word travels fast in these hills by sundown. The Ridgeview Estates Board is in a special meeting. My neighbor Bill, who goes to things for the popcorn factor, texts me. Play-by-play says they bounced Margaret unanimously, even her husband voting yes. With this tiny defeated shrug, the county put her real estate license on ice pending investigation, and the prosecutor filed a stack of charges you could doorstop a church with. You lit a fuse, Bill writes. And I tell him I didn't light anything. I just shut a gate that should have been shut a long time ago. 2 weeks later, I put on a clean jacket and drove down for the arraignment out of Principal Courthouse wood worn smooth by 1,000 boots. Judge Hoffman on the bench, a man who owns a cabin 2 valleys over and takes property lines personally. The clerk reads the list and it keeps going. Fraud, trespass, unlicensed business, the taxes. The judge asks how she pleads. She tries to stand tall. Then the room tilts for her. She wobbles, knocks into the defense table. Papers go airborne like startled birds. And she sits, because fainting that hard only happens in movies. The sentence comes later, after the plea deal. 3 years probation, 40 grand in fines, restitution to the folks. She fleeced community service that doesn't include leading anything, and a restriction that if she needs to see a cabin that badly, she can volunteer at a museum. You'd think that would be the end roll credits. Hero sips coffee as snow falls, but life loves a coda. A month after all this, I'm back on my porch at dawn. New, thermos, same view, and a truck eases up my road. Not the sheriff, not Bill. It's the quiet woman from the treasurer's office, the red scarf folded on her lap. Now she steps out with a cardboard box and tells me the county found a dozen old quilts at a thrift shop in town, all tagged, donation from Ridgeview HOA, and what I look maybe a few are mine. Inside the box are blue squares with tiny stitched pine cones. My grandmother's work, perfect and stubborn, as the woman who taught me never to give away something you love by pretending it's for the common good. I'm not much of a crier, but I'll admit I had to take a walk behind the woodshed for a minute. That afternoon, I hung a sign on the gate, not the angry kind, just a plain one that says, "Private road beyond this point. Please turn around," and folks do. Mostly, I still keep a thermos ready and the cameras rolling, not because I'm scared, but because I learned that the kindest thing you can do for a place is defend it in daylight, where everyone can see how it's done. Some people called me petty for welding that gate. Some called me a legend. Truth is, I'm neither. I'm just a guy who wanted to drink coffee on a porch without strangers licking marshmallow off his chairs. And if the scene at the gate looked dramatic, well, sometimes it takes a little theater to teach the mountains one rule: respect. The last time I saw Margaret, she was picking up trash on the shoulder of the county road with a bright vest and a stick. She didn't look at me, I didn't look at her. The hawk circled, the wind carried the smell of snow again. And I went home to blue quilts and a quiet fire. That's the part where I could say it ended clean, story tied up with a bow, but you live in a place long enough. And, there's always a next thing, a new neighbor, a new line. Someone wants to blur. So here's my question for you. Did I go too far? Welding that gate, or is a hard boundary the only language certain people understand? Where's the line between being a good neighbor and being a doormat? And who gets to decide when a community's shared experience crosses into taking what isn't yours? Tell me what you think. Seriously, was justice served? Would you have handled it softer or hit harder? And if you've dealt with an HOA overreach, or a neighbor who treats your life like a set piece, drop your story below. I'll read every one, because out here we learn from each other, and sometimes the only way to keep the peace is to talk about where the fence should be. Yeah, that happened, and I'm listening.